pause this for a moment. Here we go. Let's pause this. KO Styles. You know, my
I can hear you. So let's
yeah,
go.
it's I don't know. I'm doing everything wrong as far as how to make this podcast work. But things piece by piece will come together, I'm hoping. Oh, that's the
We're
hope anyway. I just
together, and
spilled
that's where you step
beer
in
all
the
over
direction.
the place.
So.
But yeah, anyway. Rain Dog is on with us tonight. Say what's up,
Hey,
Rain. What is up?
hi guys. Rain here with James.
Yes, indeed.
We're just
We're
chopping it up,
yep,
ripping
chopping
about
it up,
headlines that
mining,
we're looking at on the laptop. And
mining through
there,
the headlines, as it were,
so
as
just
it were.
you're not much of a sports fan, right, James?
Not really. No, not really.
Right. But just to get your perspective on this would be interesting, just from just where you're sitting and where your mind
Sure.
is the restarting of the NBA on the 30th of this month. They're in a bubble in Orlando, quarantined, if you will, from the rest of the world, but amongst all 32 teams. Oh no, no, excuse me. Um, it's the top nine in each conference, so I believe it's something of that nature. But anyway, what do you think about just them starting
I mean, it's I
with
don't
no
know.
audience, by the way?
I think. I mean, look. I think that some people want the spectacle of it, but I think at the end of the day, the performance may be tricky for some of these athletes to do because part of what drives them is the response from the crowd. You know what I mean? I think, in my estimation, you know what I mean?
So, just to get the facts straight, the NBA season is set to resume on July 30th. On March 11th, because of the coronavirus pandemic, it went on hiatus. On June 4th, the NBA Board of Governors approved a competitive format for the comeback of the season, with 22 teams returning to play and start on July 30th in Orlando.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We are in a situation where, I mean, we've got either we've got a pandemic or we don't, right? And we got to really understand whether or not. I mean, are people dying? I think people are dying, right? And it becomes tricky. People want the NBA. NBA wants to be there for the people.
Right.
So if this is a way for them to do it and it works, then great. I mean, I've seen some like piano concerts and some other stuff, other concerts, or even like Bruno Mars or something, BBC, concert, and it's just them on a stage, and it's just weird. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe if there's some way to, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to. I almost don't want to say things out loud too much because if someone hears it, they could use some of these ideas, and then I can't capitalize on them.
You're
But yeah, I mean, if
right.
they had like a ESPN or a ABC, NBC, or something like that, did something where all these people are tuning in either via internet or something else, and basically you create a virtual crowd that people can hear each other cheering and stuff. But I don't know, it would just get
You would,
weird.
you would think by now they may have developed something like that, but they're just not risking a live, say like a Zoom type environment with the act in between all these hundreds of little Zoom boxes.
Yeah, I mean it could be audio only and stuff too, but I don't know. People would say stupid shit and whatever. I mean, people say stupid shit in real life too, but
Right.
I
And
don't
then you
know.
know
I
what
mean,
people.
but I'm not a sports person, so I'm not really the guy to talk about like what, pardon me, what the drive is, because I wouldn't. I'm not the one hurting to go do this. Go hang out and watch these people do this thing that I'm not doing. And I had no
Yeah.
personal bearing in helping them do any of these things either. You know what I mean? So I never quite understood the whole sports thing so much. And like, for instance, I'm into cars and stuff like that. And like, I don't watch car racing. You know what I mean? Or I like
Yeah.
motorcycles and stuff. I think they're cool, but I don't watch motorcycle racing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm just not into that kind of thing. I don't really understand it, so it's hard for me to really get the motivation anyway. But I think that what that does is it really sheds some light on whether or not is the NBA an essential thing? Is it even worth putting these guys in a mass together to get them possibly infected from either them or staff? I mean, but then they can minimize and do contact tracing and stuff like that. I mean, it's up to the fans. I mean, it's really out of my hands. I mean, I don't really have an
Yeah.
opinion about that because that's just up to them. Is it going to work for them? I don't know. It's up to them.
I guess I'm just
You know.
more curious how you see it. If you think it's a risk, and
I mean,
or
sure,
what
it's
is
a
what
risk,
is
but it's
is it
sort
a
of it's sort
grab?
of
What do
first
you think?
world problems in a way. Sort of,
Right.
sort of,
Yeah.
because it also is a unifying concept to some degree. But I don't know. We don't really have a national team, and we don't really have like you know what I mean. It's not the same as like football. You know what I mean? Like the like World Cup or something where people sort of gather around their national team and it sort of helps them through at times of strife and stuff like that. I don't see that being part of American sports culture. If anything, it's just another reason why we separate into the different camps and like, Yankees fans hate like somebody else, Boston or something. I mean, I don't know. There's like these, everybody, the sports people, they hate certain other sports people. That's just
Yeah.
right.
That's
So it's like, you could be looking at class struggle, but this guy likes the Red Sox and it makes you all you can see is like anger. You know what I mean? It's like what? That's irrational. It doesn't matter. It's just that's what happens. I guess I don't feel it, but I see it in other people. You know what I mean?
well, as an NBA fan, I would have understood had they just not gone ahead and restarted. I understand it both ways. They have unfinished business. They want to finish the season. They're just not going to just go out just like that. That I understand. They don't want to lose out on getting paid.
Right, right. I mean, but a lot of people are like that. But I think a lot of
Yeah.
people are also figuring out that really at the end of the day, society, like they could stop working and society runs just fine without them. And I think there's people that are sort of feeling in it, sort of this, I guess, existential crisis, for lack of a better term, where they like don't, they might be making decent money for now, but it's like, oh snap, if I didn't come to work for like a month, shit would still carry on, and I think people are starting to realize that, and maybe they're trying to put a medal on their chest or whatever in the midst of this realization. But I think a lot of people are sort of seeing that, sort of getting depressed because they're taking right now. We're in a position where a lot of the sort of culture of being at work is gone. You know what I mean? Like the meeting up around the water cooler or meeting up for lunch or having a conference in the morning or all these things like staff meeting on Mondays or blah blah blah. It's like becomes this routine, this culture, and I think people are stuck at home and realize that all now that they have is work, they're realizing that it's like, damn, the shit that I do with my time all day is actually in the grand scheme of things pretty useless. Especially some of these managerial class people who are like directors, like regional director over a bunch of other managers who are managers over another subset of people who then are actually doing the work. You know what I mean?
So to put a bow on this NBA situation that I had addressed, 25 NBA players as of 3 days ago have tested positive
mm,
for C-19.
sure.
So out of 302 that were tested, so there you go. Next headline that I want to get to is FDA Commissioner Stephen Hahn um, speaking will likely be Stephen Hahn, Commissioner and Task Force member, declined to back President's prediction during an interview. I can't predict when a vaccine will be available. I just tell you about FDA's role in this. Yes, we are seeing unprecedented speed of development of a vaccine. What are your thoughts on the vaccine and the latest coronavirus posts?
I mean, we're in a weird position. I mean, I think a lot of we we are in a system because we're in a system of capitalism. We really have to think about it in that context. You know, it's like sure, there's a race for the vaccine, but then the question becomes who has access to that vaccine. You know what I mean? And what's the cost going to be? And that kind of thing. You know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and the other thing is if there isn't enough return, I mean, if whatever bean counters determine whether or not there's enough return on investment for a vaccine, will they even come up with a vaccine? You know what I mean? So this is a situation where we see over and over again, it's mask off. Like we see over and over again failures of this capitalist economy to step in and save people, our brothers and sisters under this constitution in this country, how it fails to save us, and we just sort of accept it. You know what I mean? And we really need a different paradigm. We need a situation where, like for instance, like when military people join the military, there's this sort of fantasy, either fantasy or reality, depending on the person, whether they joined for something that was sort of like bigger than themselves, I guess you could say, maybe. Um, you know, a lot of people have like this intrinsic drive to do to do that duty. You know what I mean? And it could be um, I don't know. And it's just accepted that people do that. Like, oh, these guys want to join the military to fight for their country or whatever. We just buy this intrinsic motivation for certain things, but we have to recognize that this intrinsic motivation exists all over the place, and I think we fail to recognize that. You know what I mean? And the thing is, like, so my point is, so to put a bow on that, is that we literally could have like the United States Army, or whatever we could call it, whatever you wanted to, United States, instead of the Army Corps of Engineers, it could be the Army Corps of, you know, vaccines and curative measures or something like that. And the government hires people who are intrinsically motivated to find cures, who aren't just in it for the money, who are in it to just figure this shit out. And so the government is doing this as a public service, just as we spend billions of dollars on military equipment that somehow intrinsically is motivated just to, by spirit of its presence and spirit of its whatever spirit, I don't know, that it's just doing the right thing. We just we dump 60-70% of our budget on the Pentagon, and we just expect that the ethos of that organization is going to do right by us. But we don't apply that same ethos to other things that could actually help us directly. You know what I mean? And that is in and of itself a propaganda that we have been fed and believe for whatever reasons, you know. Because propaganda is strong. That's really wise, because propaganda is strong. Mm-hmm.
Have you seen a rare case of brain-destroying amoeba has been confirmed in Florida, where you're at?
Well, I mean, that would explain a lot about Floridians. No, I shouldn't joke like that. But, you know what would really be a good, curative for that? It would
What?
be a Medicare for all. You know, if we have Medicare for all, then, or some kind of national health care, then we would be able
It's
to.
healthcare for all.
Sure, healthcare for all. You could call it TRICARE for all. Some of these veterans out there or military members are like, "Oh, I don't want the government to take over." I'm like, look, does
Unlimited
TRICARE
doctor
take
for all.
over the doctor's office? No, the TRICARE does not. It's just insurance. It's the same thing. It's the same thing that we're talking about. And anyway, whatever. If we had that, then brain eating amoeba or whatever, it could be any kind of eating amoeba, could then be cured in some way, you know, or not cured, but at least
Yeah.
looked out for in some manner. But right now we don't have that situation. We don't have it, and that's also what's causing the extension of the whole COVID crap. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I don't know, man. I don't know.
What is the Medicare for all plan? What is it?
Well,
How's it
I
gonna
mean, it's
work?
basically national health care is all it is. And it makes sense because, you know, you don't have as many administrative costs. You can really apply economies of scale. So, I don't know. I mean, it all makes sense, but it's being obfuscated or basically being propagandized against. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, propaganda's strong. They don't want to have to pay for that, and well, not even that. It's weird that the employers don't support it more, because under Medicare for all, you wouldn't have this extra burden of healthcare premiums in the same way. Especially if, you know, I'm sure there's a way to work out something that's a little more favorable for corporations, if we had a net favorable situation for corporations, even if we had national health care instead of what we see now. Because each one of those, anytime, I mean, when we look at what does efficiency mean, if we look at a government program or any kind of program, usually efficiency is bang for the buck. So it doesn't make sense anytime we see CEO or any kind of profit margin exist, then we, by definition, almost, we really are seeing evidence of an inefficiency. Because if the government was running it without the profit motive, then we wouldn't have that inefficiency, because we don't need somebody to earn profits on it. We just simply need to get it done. Just like our military. You know, there's no expectation that we're earning X dollar profit per military member, you know, that we have in military. So why is it that we have that same expectation for other, you know, programs that are out there? I don't know.
What would Medicare for all cost?
I don't know exactly. There's folks out there. I'm sure we can look it up, and there's different conflicting things out there. But it just, if you look at the cost now of premiums, of healthcare premiums plus copays plus all of that, then it's already by far and away more expensive.
More.
And
Right.
and at the end of the day, this idea that the money incentive is what's going to incentivize curative measures is false,
It's crazy.
because the profit incentive drives, like, what do you call it? Basically, treatment. It doesn't it doesn't incentivize cure. It incentivizes treatment. You see what I mean?
Like if you're
So
sick, you can get
don't
treatment.
cure cancer. Make it so you can live with cancer and pay for monthly prescription of drugs that require that, as opposed
And just
to
being left outside.
wham bam cure cancer. So that's what I'm saying. If we had a government healthcare program, we could have a government healthcare like the equivalent of a military, but it's for healthcare. And so you could have government doctors, for instance. What are they motivated by? Maybe they get paid pretty decent, but maybe they don't get paid as much as a private doctor. But just like a colonel in the military gets paid decent, but they don't get paid maybe as much as a managerial level of the same caliber. Maybe a colonel is running the equivalent of, maybe we got 40, 60 people under their command in total. Maybe that equivalent of leadership position in the private sector would pay double what the government's paying, but you also get other perks of being in the military and other government stuff that goes along with it. Plus, you get to fluff your chest out for these special reasons that we all sort of accept, that you did it for honor and defending the country. And that why couldn't someone join the American, medical corps with the thought of, I want to improve American health and American ability to live a full life, a full healthy life. You know what I mean? That idea is crazy. Even though we see that happen in real life, like teachers. How many times have we seen teachers, or I'm sure a lot of people have an experience with a teacher who stayed after class or came in on a weekend or whatever, and we might have hated them for it, but they did it without getting paid, and they did it to help you or someone you knew, or someone, or you know what I mean, something like that. And they're intrinsically motivated to do it. You know what I mean? They're not doing it because of money, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? So we forget that people do that. And that we could really have a government for the people, by the people, etc. We could have a government medical corps that could actually cure diseases. We could have a government run healthcare, not healthcare system, but even health. We could have a government run healthcare system. We could, in theory, like we love the military. We could love our medical corps the same way we love the military. You see what I mean? The military goes and does stuff overseas. The medical corps could do stuff in our shores.
I know.
Right here. And why couldn't we say thank you for your service, medical corps, for helping remove the tumors from my grandma, or anything, from helping the American public by helping, you know what I mean? People would. I think it's just our culture. It's what we would. It's just what we have to think of, a new paradigm is all. But there's
ingrained
a lot of
in the
propaganda.
fabric of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of propaganda.
Don't you think sometimes people, young men and women who plan to join the military, feel like they are doing something for their country, but
absolutely,
when it all
like I said, for some reason
they are doing things for other countries.
Well, right, exactly. They think they joined for these sort of, like I said, intrinsic, really sort of deep reasons, and they aren't superficial, like just for money, or because obviously you could get paid more doing other things than the military. It's because you are either motivated, or maybe there are some other things that you join for other reasons. It could be other motivations like college or other perks, etc. Sure, but at the end of the day, it's always acceptable and a social norm, to fall back on this idea that military members join for something beyond monetary gain. Does that make sense? Yeah, you know what I'm saying. I mean, that doesn't make. And so
Service above self.
right, a service above self. So why is it that teachers aren't recognized in that way? And there is a culture to do that, but there's also a conflicting culture that calls teachers leeches and that says that the public school system is garbage and da 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 and whatever. So there's sort
I
of
was just
this
reading this. I don't know.
it's a neurosis in our country,
Go ahead.
really. It's a sickness, mental sickness.
I don't know if this is referring to the United States or what, but it says government schools teachers are paid well too as compared to salary in other sectors. This is true in case of some private schools. They exploit the idea of availability of teachers because of relatively less hours of work as compared to other jobs.
Yeah,
Mostly
there's
ladies
this
prefer to take
idea
up
that
teaching.
they get the summers off or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so so you have to think about that, and teachers do have to think about that. But if we have to create a new paradigm, then let's create a new paradigm. By which we can
Switch it.
switch teachers. Maybe if we have to keep them working all year, maybe the kids are on half the year, and then but the teachers are on all year, or I don't know. We'll figure it out. But there's got to be a way to let's talk about it. You know what I mean? What is it that's wrong? Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And maybe it isn't 100% about the teacher pay, and it's more about teacher resources within the school systems and things like that. I don't know. But I think we really need to have a discussion about the efficacy of it as opposed to dismantling of it. That we should hone it to be better as opposed to have a dialogue about dismantling it, because that's the contra dialogue of trying to make it better is to simply just get rid of it, which is and replace it with private charter schools and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
So it's really a new conversation that we should be trying to have, but I don't know. There's not very many people trying to have that kind of conversation. That it's more of a nuanced conversation, And it takes work, and we're lazy people that don't want to do it. We're children, really. The American culture has created a bunch of children. Is sort of what we've become. In general, the net effect.
Which states
In my
get
opinion.
paid the most? But which states pay their teachers the most? I just checked it. So it says high school teachers in New York, California, Massachusetts, Alaska, and Connecticut all pay 76,000 or higher. 77, yeah. And then the lowest is South Dakota, where it's average of 42,000 a year. The average is 58,000 or 59,000.
Yeah, I mean, so like I said, some of the issue may not be 100% about teacher pay, though in some cases teacher pay definitely does need to be improved. So like I said, it may be a nuanced issue that we're really looking at. Let's see here. So it looks like we've got a couple folks. Maybe I don't know if you're actually.
Nope, not monitoring YouTube, but
You're not
hello to our
monitoring, so
viewers.
we do actually have two folks that are on with us on YouTube. So if you are with us on YouTube, Superfan Chris is on. Yo, what is up? What are your thoughts? So that's awesome. We got Superfan Chris on. Rein, meet Superfan Chris. He's been on the show, been following the show for a good while now. So pretty regularly, and usually jumps on the live chat and whatnot. So, but what was I gonna say? Oh, by the way, Superfan Chris, let us know if there's any audio issues or anything else that we could do to make sure that this is working correctly.
What do you want to talk about, Chris? What do you want us to speak on?
And looks like we actually have a third. Are you monitoring now? Or maybe it's someone else. I don't know. Spread the word. I'm actually going to try to dump this on Facebook one more time and see what's up.
Yeah, I would like to share it as
And
well, but I'm just a handful on this side.
here,
Throw it
let
in the
me. I'll
mess
throw it in the
chat rooms that we
messenger
have.
chat room
In
that we
what?
have, just as
Thank
you
you.
have just said, and we'll send this around. See what people think about what is going on. Though I will probably have to be bouncing out of here in not too long, but let's just see what happens. Let's see what
You say
happens.
that
All
all
right,
the time.
Lauren is on. What is up, Lauren? Hey, what are we discussing? How about this? Just roll the dice on a new one. Rein, what is on? What do
Yeah.
you find?
Yeah.
What nugget did you dig out of
Ready?
the headlines? Yes, we
You
are
ready?
ready.
This is very important. This is very important. Eviction crisis. Housing advocates fear waves of homelessness as moratoriums expire. So
Yes.
moratoriums on evictions will expire soon.
Wow. Now, okay, so hopefully everyone's able to hear what Rainer is saying. Please let me know if you're not. If you just hear me sitting here in silence out there in YouTube world, then that means you do not hear Rain talking, and you can't hear what we're talking about. Anyway, so yes,
Oh,
I am very concerned about this eviction moratorium, which also will look at. I mean, it's going to cascade also into the mortgage moratorium issue because there's two levels of this. There's and it's not quite the same thing as the great philosopher poet Meek Mill has taught us about. There's levels to this shit. It's a little bit different. But it is the same way. In a way, it's the same. So you have household owners, homeowners, who either now are unemployed or will soon be underemployed. One thing you have to remember is whenever we have this big bump of unemployment, which we have supposedly, we have 30 plus million, 30 to 40 million supposedly that are now unemployed. And so, what does that mean? So, what that means is even if you're employed, what does your employer know that they can do? Right? They
mhm.
know that they can say, look, either you do what I say or I'll find someone who will. Right? And you do what I say could mean more hours for less pay, could mean cutting back benefits. It could be any number of things because now they know there's a whole horde of desperate zombies out there that will practically sacrifice their life in order to feed their family because they don't really have a choice. You know, they're up against a wall of some sort. You know what I mean? Um,
Yeah.
so anyway, there's that level, but then there's also the level of the landlord, right? The landlord who went into debt and bought and created the mortgage to buy a house that they're now renting out. So you hear a lot of people talk about their rental properties, HGTV, this and that, or you have all these different people that do seminars on how to buy all this real estate so you can create rental streams of income and doobie doobie doobie. Those folks, you know, they are expecting rental income to pay their mortgages. Well, when you have massive unemployment, and then you also have people who are, you know, you have employers who know that they can reduce wages. Now you have a reduction of wages. You now have a deflationary force that says basically, I can't pay your rent, right? So I can't pay your rent, so you're gonna have to drop rent. And so these landlords are gonna have to start dropping their rent to the point where they can no longer pay their mortgage anymore. So they're gonna start for getting foreclosed on. So not only are homeowners, you know, primary home, they live in it, da da da, they're gonna get foreclosed on, and then the landlords are gonna get foreclosed on, which means that both of those, all these foreclosures are also going to flood the market, which is going to drop home prices, which may or may not help people. The thing is, there's going to be such big unemployment that people aren't going to be able to take advantage of the upcoming housing crisis anyway, unless they already have capital. So the rich that have money will gain more ownership of stuff as people consolidate, or excuse me, as people have to sell things to get, you know, to survive. because it's not like you can just go live off. Most people can't just go live off the land at this point. You know what I mean? There's no alternative. If you can't find a job, then you can't pay rent. There's no. I mean, you know what I mean? Things just are going to start falling apart. We're on the precipice, or we are on the verge of something akin to the Great Depression, but we have extra technology. So it's going to be like this weird, almost like, I don't know if it's going to be like a post-apocalyptic depression where we have some level of extra technology that helps us get through some of it better than before, but we're going to also look at food shortages and different things like that, material shortages, other kind of commodity shortages, as things start to consolidate and as energy prices go up, or as global conflict starts to ensue, as you're going to start seeing right-wing governments start to pop up, because people will be acting out of fear, and they will romanticize some past era at some national level within different nations. We've seen this in the past. We see this now. We're going to see that exacerbated as things get worse. We already see miles-long waiting lines for unemployment. And so these will ripple and cascade. And right now we see the stock market not reflecting that. And what that means is a major disconnect between the stock market and financial markets and reality. And so the reality of the American working class versus the American financial class is becoming more and more apparent. And yeah, this is, I mean, people accuse me of doom and gloom, or I'm going to manifest this future. And, if this was 1929 and I was saying, man, this is going to be bad, it's going to cascade, this is da 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 da. Now, did I manifest it? Or were the cogs in place that we should have seen it happen? There's an author out there that was talking about how the baby boomer generation might be possibly the dumbest generation, and because of their self-serving interests, that they would basically sell their children out in order to gain for now. And that's sort of the net effect. So now, of course, not all baby boomers are this way. A lot of hippies and stuff were like overly empathetic and this and that, but it never netted out to changing in policy. The net effect of the baby boomer generation was crashes of financial markets and an economic system by which they basically set up a crash that said, and their philosophy was, I'll be dead by the time the climate crashes and the economy fully crashes, so fuck you, pay me, and be my children be damned, basically. And I'm not just angstful about boomers or something like that. I mean, there's a couple years ago, there was an author that was talking about the sociopath generation. I can't remember, the generation of sociopaths, I think is what it's called. And it's really talking about the net effect of boomer elections, boomer philosophy, etc. is the psychopathic system that we have now, or sociopathic system we have now. And they could have done something, but they didn't. And that, I guess that was the point for some of these. Now we do have, looks like we got some folks on.
We have some discussion in the chat room.
Yes, we do have
Lauren,
some discussion on here. So
Lauren,
Lauren,
I work for a lender that lends extensively to landlords. Yes. We are still offering deferments for them while their tenants are unemployed, and we are pretty liberal with those deferments. And then a response was, it's very good to hear that there are lenders out there that are still able to help landlords and investors with rentals. I hope landlords do the right thing and not charge tenants. And Lauren responded, at this point, we still aren't even asking for any paperwork, precisely because banks foresee the situation you are talking about. I think banks will hold off on foreclosures. I think depression hit when we don't see it coming. I think lenders and the government are preparing for this to avoid it. And the response was massive late fees. Also, I think there might be a foreclosure crisis as we see many years ago because banks are so much more equipped, et cetera. So yeah, go ahead, James.
Yeah, I think. Wait, where did you said they're more equipped
And they're
for? Yes, handle this goal.
equipped
The
to
subprime
slow down
mortgages. Yes,
subprime
okay.
lending.
So Superfan Chris talks about the subprime mortgages. Lauren also
Right.
mentions uh, banks have no way to ensure the help gets to the end user. Neither does the government. We are on top of the 10 PPPP lender. Okay, so you're okay. The organization she's part of. And so okay, so yes, so a couple issues here. Superfan Chris is right. We don't have the subprime crisis per se being the issue. The issue now is not only, well, let me back up. So in the Great Recession, we had the subprime issue, and then we had the contraction of the economy, which then caused wage stagnation and also unemployment, right? Which then exacerbated the housing crisis, right? So now it's something different. It's COVID driven, right? So now we have a situation where we have mass unemployment. So unless something changes unemployment, which I don't know what leadership or what national investment or private investment or whatever is going to motivate a massive employment to make up for what was lost. We're not only going to see the paradox of thrift, which means people will stop spending, which of course, in order to spur the economy, we need people to spend, but when they're afraid, they won't spend. So we're going to start seeing consumer confidence. If it's not already hitting our all-time low, it will soon. And that's the whole thing is instead of subprime mortgages being the issue and having higher interest rates being like we can't pay the mortgage, and that's why we're looking at unemployment being being the issue now. And even if they create like shelters and stuff in preparation for the massive eviction crisis, it doesn't mean that you're going to get people who will pay the mortgages that the banks require. Now, not to say that some lenders aren't willing to work with people, which is great, right? But those lenders a lot of times have shareholders, and those the lenders have people that they have to bow to, right? Now they do have the ability to get help from the from the Fed basically from the national government, federal government. Whether or not, like Lauren says, it gets to the end user becomes a question because when the bank gets it, they may go because a lot of the restrictions have been lifted, Dodd-Frank and all that kind of stuff. The investment side of the bank doesn't necessarily have to be completely segregated from the lending side of the bank. Now there are some rules that are supposed to keep that in place, but the thing is, it's not happening. There's a lot of insolvency going on. The people aren't getting bailed out. The corporations are getting bailed out, and there's a lot of lack of leadership. Which right now we have a band-aid that the lenders won't do anything crazy, but for their own interest, they need to figure something out. But at the same time, some of them are being run by sort of short-term vision sociopaths. So how do you know? They may not even be looking at a long-term, situation. They might be looking at quick foreclosure, quick flip before the major crisis. So I don't, we have a mixture of a lot of things. People are getting foreclosed on right now. Now that some of the courts are opening. So there's a lot going back and forth. So if you're lucky enough to be with a lender who sees a bigger picture, then super duper. If you're not, if you're with a more predatory lender, then you're sort of screwed, right? All right. So, Paycheck Protection Program is what Lauren was talking about. Free forgivable loans to small businesses.
Both great ideas.
Yeah, so she's talking about they don't want to go under as a bank. They'd go under if they don't get those payments, and it's in their best interest to forgive missed payments, right? And so it's a blend. At the same time, if you're not getting the payments anyway, there's a point where you're gonna say, I'm gonna have to cut my losses and pull the plug and reacquire the asset, at some point, and then therefore, I mean, there's
Yeah.
a foreclosure, right?
True.
And so that's where this is going to last for a little while, but then your bank's going to be up against the wall, and then what? And it's not because of the bank's fault. It's that we have a systemic crash. We have like supposedly 30 to 40,000 out of 150,000 people that are part of our working population that are unemployed right now. I mean, that's like dang near a third of our, like 30% almost, are, or around that, are unemployed. And that
So
is,
right now, less than half the country.
that's worse than that's worse than back in the Great Depression. And that's what the scary thing is. Like we hear about the trauma that the Great Depression caused on the people that passed through the Great Depression, and I mean, we may be looking at something worse than the Great Depression. What does that even look like? I don't even. I mean, that might even. I mean, that might be some Mad Max shit. I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know.
Unemployment insurance expires at the end of this month, and a bunch of remaining eviction moratoriums. So are you saying we could expect to see a severe eviction crisis across the United States?
Yeah, I
By
mean,
that
I
time?
think it's Louisiana has already created like stadiums and different things that they've converted into
Getting
basically
ready.
mass homeless shelters for this eviction hurricane that's about to come. You know what I mean?
Super dope.
So that is what we have to look forward to. So I mean, we have this is where I keep talking about the spiritual reckoning of our nation. We we have a culture that says if I have a job and everything's cool with me, then I guess everything must just be cool. Meanwhile, whole stadiums of our fellow Americans are filling up with evicted people who can't make rent. And there's going to be a point where we either continue to let that happen and we fall further into, I mean, we're basically third world country as it is. If we really look at, other than our military, if we really look at infrastructure, if we look at access to health care, access to clean water, I mean, look, Flint's not the only city that has lead in their water, that practically has unpotable water. Like you could get brain damage with long-term exposure to some of our public water, and we make fun of going to South Korea or something and saying, "Oh, you might have diarrhea if you drink the water instead of drinking beer or bottled water." And here we are, have lead in our water, have other heavy metals in our water, and we have our children bathing in it, we're drinking it, and that is our public water in our country. We have people who have no access to health care, who have go bankrupt because they have the unfortunate situation of catching cancer or developing cancer or some other disease. Oh, God forbid you have a genetic disease, you're born with it, is no choice of your own, and that may ruin your whole life or your family's life because how much is it? How much is the life of your family member worth? How much is your life worth? If someone stands to make profit on it, how much profit could they make, and would they do it? If Martin Shkreli is your doctor, how much will he charge you if he's the only guy with the cure? And that is our ethos in America. That is acceptable in America. We have created the "fuck you, pay me" society, and we are living with the results of that right now. You know, we teach our kids to share and be somewhat altruistic with each other, and then we shed all of that somehow, some way into adulthood. Some of us, and we exalt the values of the antisocial sociopath that makes it. You know, so Epstein gets
How is it
the
acceptable to have
Epstein
level
has
of lead in
has
drinking
the
water?
private island, and he probably
Yes.
gets
Another perfect
placed.
narrative, James.
Yeah, he gets placed into the best seats in the restaurant. Meanwhile, the best math teacher in town doesn't even get to go into the restaurant. You know what I mean? So it's just a weird we have a weird society, and we're living with the ramifications of this society right now. Um, so Lauren says, yes, you were right. This will work temporarily. A bank will forgive payments as long as it's smarter for us. Right. But they still have to survive as a business entity. So at a certain point, their back will be up against the wall. They will start having to foreclose on people in order to protect their asset and their balance sheet. And, or they'll start selling the debt off, and then that person or the next entity will then foreclose on them. You know what I mean? So it maybe sure you as a lender can sleep at night because you sold the debt off to XYZ loan consolidation corp, and they end up foreclosing and seizing the property. You know what I mean? So that's sort of that's just the system. So I mean, it's just this, like, we don't accept child labor in America, but we're just as fine buying iPhones made by children, right? Or buying Teslas with
Check your message.
shit that's mined by kids. Now, I'm not saying that the Tesla's bad, or I'm not saying that iPhones are bad. We live in a society where we really don't have. If we want these things, there's not really. It's almost impossible for us to have this full disclosure. You know what I mean? But yeah, what are your thoughts, man?
I don't. I lost. What were we talking about?
Oh, just
What up?
just the
Wait.
system that we're in, because we're facing a foreclosure crisis now, and part of that's going to be, how are we going to make it through this? If the bank has to keep itself alive and they end up having to foreclose on people, now what? You know, now you got mass homelessness.
Right.
Now what? Or you don't have people that are going to buy anything. And now what?
Hmm.
So, Superfan Chris asks, are those numbers based on unemployment or underemployment individuals under those two categories? They get intertwined. I mean, there's a lot of different people saying a lot of different things. Depends on who your source is. You know what I mean? It's a crazy situation. What was the next headline you had, Rein?
Oh, yeah. Um. Um. Bill Clinton
Bill Clinton. What's going on with Bill
and the
Clinton?
inside trip to Britain with what's her name?
Oh,
Joseline.
Ghislaine Maxwell.
What's her name? What is it? How do you say it?
Ghislaine. I think it's Ghislaine.
What the fuck? Something Maxwell.
Yeah, Ghislaine Maxwell. Hmm.
Kevin Spacey is in this group as well, and then the royal family is getting pulled out the dirt or dragged into the dirt with this story as well, with some pictures popping up. I guess I haven't really been following it,
Oh
but it's
yeah, man.
interesting.
There's a whole Netflix doc about it. It's nuts, man. So I think
That
it's the Prince. Shit, what's his name? Prince Albert or something. I don't remember his name actually.
Andrew,
Andrew, sorry, Prince Albert. Prince Andrew, sorry. Um,
Prince Al, a ring in your dick, I
yeah,
think.
yeah, right. Exactly. But anyway, yeah, he supposedly was hanging with Epstein, doing the Epstein thing with the underage girls and that whole thing, network of human trafficking. Yeah. So of course that does not make the royal family feel so hot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Well, they're trying to distance themselves, of course, from that. But what do you think about that whole situation? I know you said you weren't. What do you know about it? I know you said you aren't following it real deep, but what do you know about?
They were definitely trafficking underage women through these through highfalutin people.
Yeah, like the whole premise, I guess, is that they were able to sort of
These
capitalize
Democrats.
on these sort of these appetites of people and blackmail them. Supposedly, there's cameras and different things throughout the island, throughout the house, and things like that. So people like Prince Andrew would go to the private island. Maybe Bill Clinton, maybe some of these other people, maybe even Donald Trump, maybe because there's pictures of Epstein and Trump together from a while back. And all these different high-profile folks that are implicated in this by that are participants in this ring, and that he probably did have some kind of blackmail gunk on and was able to hang that over their head. And there's also a theory that Ghislaine Maxwell was actually the handler for Epstein. So a lot of people are
Yeah.
talking about how Epstein was the guy and that she just helped him. It might be the other way around. I don't know.
Mm.
I don't know. And Lauren said that people are pulling everyone from Beyonce to Hillary Clinton into Epstein.
Dang.
But she says it's a trend. She doesn't buy most of it. I don't know. I think,
Right. Right.
I mean, it sounds pretty intriguing that there's this sort of undercover. I mean, there's so much evidence of cover up that it makes me think that something bad happened. Why? What are you covering up? Nobody covers up something good happening. You know what I mean?
Mm.
If anything, they try to
Yeah.
show everybody, right? So something bad is happening. So because there's so much cover up. So
To me, as long as the the um the nature of the Clintons, I'm good with it. Bring
what?
it up. Keep it
Oh,
coming.
well, I think for me, it should. I wanted to just expose the nature of anybody in power that we need to know
Of
about,
course.
or anybody in general. I mean, it doesn't matter who you are. You could be whatever you to think is the most unessential person if you're involved in underage people or any kind of sex trafficking. I mean, it doesn't have to be underage. I mean, if someone's doing something either against their will or they're coerced or through some kind of other
You're right.
weird mind trap. I mean, this
Right.
documentary, man, they talk about the victims talk about how they sort of get from point A to point B, and it just doesn't even. It's weird. It doesn't even make sense how that happens. But yeah, it's
Mhm.
crazy. Um,
Do you want to continue with some politics or some
sure, yeah.
coronavirus?
Lauren did have one more point about the Epstein thing, saying that when she was 16 or 17, she had full mental facility to make a choice if she wanted to go to a rich dude's island or not. Plenty smart enough to know that as I was offered these free travel and luxury accommodations, uh, that I was gonna get smashed by old dudes. Okay, and Superfan Chris.
Right.
So
Lauren.
yeah, so what are your thoughts on that, Rein? She's saying it makes me angry when we equate this to child molestation.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. You're right about that. You schooled me on that. It's just not just that. You're right.
Oh, wait,
It's
okay,
more
so
than
wait,
just
what? Wait, say that again. Go
where
through your
she
point
says
again.
she's saying she doesn't like it when this Epstein situation only gets equated to child molestation, right? That's what she just said.
Oh yes, it
Because she's
normalizes.
saying it's not just child molestation. There's all kinds of nefarious sex, whatever, with all kinds of ages and all kinds of genders and things, right? That's what she's saying.
Well, she says that it normalizes that normalizes pedophilia. I think maybe talking about like the well, I don't know. Let me think. Maybe Lauren,
Lauren, get on the line.
maybe you can elaborate that a little bit more. You can jump on Skype too. We can conference you in on Skype. Excuse me, if you want to
Anyways,
discuss it.
about this whole
But yeah.
thing,
Anyway, we can get back to
um,
that as well. Go ahead,
underage
Rin.
boys and girls. It's of age people. right? Is that where we're getting to? What's going on?
I don't know. I think she.
Or should we just move on to another headline now?
I think she's. Because these weren't necessarily super young, like 6-year-old girls, or like they're like six, even though I mean, granted, I mean you're right, 16, 17-year olds, some 16, 17-year olds are of a mental faculty that make these decisions and not be coerced into this kind of thing.
Right there.
But we as a society, now we could say that maybe we would draw the line at 16, but we as a society said the age of majority to make these kind of consenting agreements and this type of thing, that you would be, I mean, by the end of the day 16, 17s would still by definition be statutory rape, right, and that kind of thing. So you know what I mean? So there's a sort of a, I think there's a definitely a it's not an equation of that. It's still a taking advantage, and a lot of times these supposedly a lot of times these girls that got wrangled into it are coming from a low financial situation, and so this is their sort of remedy, financial remedy for their personal plight. You know what I mean? And yeah, I'm not excusing it, but that might be with you when you have some level of desperation, maybe do crazy stuff. I don't know. What do you think, Rein?
Situation, so you were one of the ones that was of the right mind not to get coerced and things like that. But how about there's probably more who are not mature enough to not be coerced, who want that kind of attention from someone with wealth and to be taken to lavish places. That is in itself will make you do anything.
Let me see. So yeah, so Superfan Chris says what she's saying is that it lumps in girls who are by their own going by their own free will to a rich dude's house versus young girls under 10 or so, etc., that are snatched up against their will. Yeah, absolutely. I don't think they're the same. I'm not trying to equate them myself. I'm not, when I say sex trafficking, I'm not limiting it specifically to pedophilia, or not trying to say that it's only pedophilia.
In here.
Even if there were 18-year-olds, that would be sort of still questionable, to some degree, depending on their situation. I mean, I guess at the end of the day, sure, I guess they're engaging in escort behavior or whatever, and they're sex workers at that point if they're 18. I don't know. I don't know how much I 100% believe in statutory boundaries per se, as like this like brick wall either, to your point, Lauren, because yes, 16, 17-year-olds are able to make their own decisions, but at the same time, as a society, we've sort of said, all right, we're going to draw the line at 18, age of majority, to make those kind of decisions. Though you could still, with parental consent, or maybe even without, you can engage in a marriage at like 14 in some states or whatever. So I don't know. Yeah, so
What those dirty bastards.
yeah, so I mean, I don't know. You're right. It is weird, but it's still taking advantage. There is a component whereby there's sort of a normalization and a coercive nature to the way that things happened, I guess. So I don't know. I mean, you're right. I don't know. I'm not the one to speak for the actions of other people. I can't get into their heads. I'm not gonna. I don't know. It just. I don't know. Like I said, we have sort of decided that as a society that 16 and 17-year-olds and stuff, or younger than 18, don't can't make their own decisions per se. And then the men are. Oh, and lumping men attracted to teenage girls versus I don't know about the prepubescent part. I don't know if that's necessarily part of this situation. So I don't know. Yes, but okay, I'm not trying to say that they're the same as the like pedophiles of young children the same way. I just think there was some kind of weird sex ring going on. So I don't know. Anyway, what are your
And
thoughts,
you don't
Rein?
think that included some underage children?
What was that? Oh, maybe I don't know. I don't really know what the whole deal was or who.
I mean,
There may have
somebody
been.
like Kevin Spacey was involved. You know the story about that, right?
No, what was that? I don't know the detail. I know he was involved, but I don't know
It
the
was like
detail.
a coworker, or like a person he was in a working with, and was and then grabbed the dude.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Was it with the was it Epstein related?
Well, I'm gonna look it up right now.
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't know what the
Yep.
details were with the
I'll
whole.
keep the shit that's seen this long. But I guess it's my bad for bringing it up. But
Yeah,
I
I
just
mean,
wanted to make
I don't
one.
know. Yeah, I don't know.
But hey, man, there's a lot of layers to this crap.
Right. I mean, it's definitely something for the public to talk about. You know.
In December 2018, Kevin Spacey was charged with a felony of allegedly sexually assaulting, a journalist. Oh, this is something else. 18-year-old. Oh, a journalist's 18-year-old son in Nantucket, Massachusetts in July 2016. Spacey pleaded not guilty
Oh
to
wow.
the charge in 2019. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, there's people doing all sorts of weird stuff, or not weird. I don't know. It depends on what society labels it as. I don't know. In Greek society, I guess I'm sure Kevin Spacey would love this argument that Greek society that would be normal, so, in ancient Greece or something like that. I don't know.
And take a look at the picture of that Maxwell bitch with sitting on the throne with Kevin Spacey. Did you see that?
No, no,
They're like sitting up there, like, yeah.
man.
And then what did she has? And she was supposed to supposedly have been the what?
Well, I
The
mean, maybe the ringleader. I don't really know. I don't. I mean,
conduit.
can you really trust? I mean, I don't know. I think we live in an era where we can't really trust anything anyone says. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Oh,
but
something I wanted
yes, go ahead.
on the monuments,
Yes,
the taking down Confederate monuments seems to be a big deal.
right. Well, there's a couple ways to look at it. To me, it's why were they up in the first place? Some of these were put up in the '60s as a affront to the civil rights movement. So, why then? So if that's the case, should we keep them around? You know, and the other question I have is, do we not have leaders in this country that weren't racist? Could we not have monuments to leaders that don't have majorly racist problems? Or was racism so pervasive in our country that can we at least admit that racism was so pervasive that we don't even have leaders that didn't have racist elements of their lives that are tied in to their lives? You know, I don't know. Or is society only making monuments to these racist people? And there were non-racist leaders and heroes, but we're choosing to only make monuments to the ones that have racist problems. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is to that. Maybe we have to answer that question first to determine whether we should keep them up or not. You
You know
know?
what we should do? We should replace all those monuments. We should bring them down and then replace them with um, those who were murdered by the hands of police.
Sure. I mean, I think that could work. I mean, we could shove them all in a big museum and say where they take a picture of where they used to be, and
Want to go there?
then you could say, here, this is where it used to be. This is when it was erected and why, and it could be a sort of tapestry of American racism. I mean, and acceptance of racism as a historic document. You know what I mean, in a way. But I don't know. I don't think keeping statues up or whatever of people that have major issues, and we may say, well, oh my God, we'll have to get rid of all of our leaders, and well, maybe we have to really reflect on who we herald as leaders. I mean, I don't know. There's a lot to be said about that, you know. Let's see. Lauren says, my neighborhood burned down, and I'm all for it. She's from Minneapolis, right, I believe. And something problematic will. Every current leader, something problematic. And maybe that's the case, and maybe that's the ebb and flow of society. I don't know. But I think keeping them up sort of normalizes the flaws that do exist, you know. And sort of, yeah, keeps them that way. But yeah. But I think tonight there's a good session. We've been on, let's see, now that we got things sort of settled in, we were on a little over an hour. So I hope this Sunday session was a fun little gathering that we were able to talk about some current events and different things. What do you think, Rein? Want to do this again at some other Sunday? Spread the word and talk about some issues.
Yes, of course, James. Let's do it.
That's what's up.
Hope you guys enjoyed our conversation.
Absolutely. Please like, subscribe, tell your friends. Sunday Sesh sort of shows up whenever. Maybe you guys tell us when we should have it on. When are you able to be on so that you can join the conversation? Because that's really what it's about. Trying to get through this bullshit together and figure out what the fuck is really going on around us. So until next time, this is James, and got Rein on with me. And we will hit you up next time. Peace
Mining
out.
the headlines.
That's right, mining the headlines. And we are out.